Yo, what is going on, everybody? Isaac Mashman here, and welcome back for another episode of Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman, the show that is all about helping you become a more capable individual through sharing my experiences in business, life, and personal growth, and also the experiences of the wonderful guests that I have on. And today, I actually have a mutual connection and an introduction of a mutual friend, Colin Castrina, rather, excuse me. His name is Mark Van Stratum, and it's really cool because doing research into his background and into his story, I've never talked to somebody with a similar background or upbringing or outcome. And so I'm really excited to, share some of the things that he has going on. He's a business owner. He's also the author of multiple books, and I want to get into that discussion because I'm sure that he has a ton of value for anybody who's wanting to be self-published. Massive respect. Mark, how are you doing today, brother? What's going on?
Good, man. Pretty good, man. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm happy to be here.
100%, man. It's an honor. And you said off camera that this is your first ever podcast.
Yeah. No,
Oh man,
maybe I've done one before, but nothing serious, Yeah.
nothing serious, right? Okay, cool. Well, dude, I don't even know where to start with your background and from, doing some research into you and your background. I know that you were originally born in the Netherlands and you have a wild upbringing. So can you tell me about that upbringing and being born in a small town too? And I think that the small towns in Europe and that kind of region is a little bit different than the small towns here in America. Here in America, you just have a bunch of like redneck country folk, and then over in Europe, from my personal observations, it's a little bit different, of a culture. How was that?
Yeah, it's the. I mean, you have to understand. Like, I don't really know that much about the U.S. I've lived in the U.S., but in San Diego and in Vegas. Been in Vegas a lot, but that's pretty much it. So I don't really know
Right.
anything about small villages in the U.S. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm originally from The Hague, so that's not necessarily a small village. That's a big city. And I lost my arm when I was a kid. Look, I'll show you. And no
Yeah.
hand there. So I lost my arm when I was 5 years old in a train accident. And my childhood was tough, you know what I mean? Like, because of that, like I got bullied, and that's only the start of it, you know what I mean? Eventually, like getting depressed, starting with depression, like, getting into drugs, into crime, eventually going into juvenile detention. And that's when I just came to that's really what my first book's about, you know what I mean? I came to a profound realization when I was inside, where I realized, like, look, I was an angry kid, I was just angry, right? I was angry what happened to me. I was angry for the way people were treating me. But at the same time, the reason why I was inside was because of my own actions, not because of one of anybody else. And nobody else put me in there except myself.
Hmm.
Even though, because that's something that comes up in my first and my second book all the time, where I'm like, look, your circumstances, or you don't choose your emotions, or you don't choose your circumstances, but however, you do choose what you do with those emotions and those circumstances. You know what I mean? So because in my case, when I was a kid, we have to understand I was a teenager. So what did I know, right? So, but I was pissed off, and I started lashing out, and I started doing things that were illegal, and those things got me in jail. And it's pretty
Yeah.
simple. But as a kid, as an angry kid, and I see even a lot of adults don't really realize that. You know what I mean? That, like, there's consequences to their behavior, and that even though if people treat you like shit, doesn't mean you have to treat yourself like shit. That's
Mm.
what it is. So
Right.
yeah, so I left the country. I moved to Poland, actually, and I met like a lot of new people there. And then I was in Poland, and I made myself an agreement with myself that I would not fall back into old behavior. You know what I mean? I would really like choose the people around me, choose, like, good friend, intelligent people that were going places, not people that were not doing the kind of bad things that I was used to. And I just started building a social circle like that. And then and from there on, actually, and this is all in the first book, right? But from there on, I actually got into because I was in my early 20s, and so I went to the clubs, and what do you do when you're in 20? You go pick up girls. And that was difficult for me in the beginning, also because I was insecure because of my arm, you know what I mean, and all those things. But eventually, I took the scientific approach at one point, where I started to study like evolutionary psychology, social dynamics,
Mm.
those kind of things, until I got exceptionally good at it. And then I got hired by a company in LA, actually, and they flew me all over the world to teach guys everywhere to pick up girls. And
Sheesh.
that's what that's what I did. But it's really funny, because what happened then is, of course, I met my girlfriend, my ex-wife. I met then, so she eventually married her, but she's not my ex-wife. I met during that time as well. And but what I really learned, I really learned a lot about people. I learned a couple of things when I did that. First of all, I learned that anything is learnable. That because especially that's because that was always one of those things, right? Like you had the guys that get all the girls, and you had the guys who don't get all the girls, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know what I mean? That's what people were saying always, And then I learned that no, that's not the case. I mean, people respond to behavior, right? If you treat people a certain way, they're going to react a certain way. That's just how it is. And the same goes in your relationship. You know what I mean? Whether or not it's one night stands or whether or not it's a long-term relationship. You know what I mean? Like however you portray yourself as, and however you adjust your behavior to the situation you're in, that's the results are going to be different. So I learned that. And also, especially that was something that everybody said that you can't learn that. It's not learnable. It's something you're born with, or you have it, or you don't have it. And I realized like, no, it's not true. There's a science. If you look at it and you collect the data, you will see patterns, and you will see certain types of behavior get certain types of results. And I then and one of my clients actually was he hired us for like a few weeks actually. Was a very famous, I mean, in the space, famous and wealthy affiliate marketer, who explained to me his business. And that's when I realized how applicable everything that I had learned dating was to business, basically, because it's basically, you have a product, you present it in a certain way, you get attraction, you get people interested in your product, you build comfort with those people, you make sure that they get familiar with you, and then you close, right? And that's how you build relationships, and that's how you build businesses as well. So I became very successful with that very early on. And and that's basically my first book, and I take people, because it's a story, right? It's a story. It's not a textbook, it's a story. So I take people through the entire emotional journey, and I teach people everything that I've learned along the way that's gotten me where I am now.
Man, I think that with all that, you gave away your entire story. End of interview. Just kidding, man. Just kidding. No. I'm playing.
Not really, because then there's the second book.
The second book, right?
The second book is going to be a surprise. The second book is going to be published in October.
Well, before we hop into your second book that's coming out, I want to kind of take a step back and digress and slow it down really quick and talk more so about your upbringing and getting into those situations that might not be the easiest thing to talk about, because I think that there are a lot of lessons that are learned. And yes, you discussed that in your first book. I haven't had the opportunity to read it just yet, but I'm super excited to read your second book when it's coming out. But I've heard from a lot of different people that, the streets, you have a different aspect of business, and you also have to study behavior when you're on the streets, right? You have to understand when you're pushing somebody or when you're going to be in a situation. Now, you ended up finding yourself in a situation that was horrible, right? Like you pretty much got jumped by rival dealers. What were some of the key lessons that you learned? If you could take a couple of minutes and talk about that. And then also, I was curious to know, because a lot of times your upbringing can influence the outcome of your life to a large degree. Were your parents involved in your life at all? What were their thoughts about what was going on? Or did you come from maybe a single parent home where dad wasn't in the picture, or maybe he was, but wasn't quite a good influence?
That's an interesting question. I'll talk about my parents first, because I skipped over that part, and it's funny because my dad was not in the picture. No, my dad left when I was 12, and so raised by single mother and two sisters, basically, and it's they couldn't handle me, so it was like that. My dad wasn't there, and it's funny that I skipped over it, because I remember when I wrote the book, there's the chapter where he leaves. Every time when I was editing it, I would skip that chapter. It was too painful for me. It was really too painful for me. It was just like, right. I couldn't even read it myself. So that was the situation, single mother household, and so that it's tough, it's tough for a single mother to control a young teenage boy that's full of rage,
Right.
That's for this, yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, like I've never met my biological father, so this is something that, like, you might have met him, but I grew up watching my mom struggle up until the time she got remarried, and I talk about that. But that's also one of those areas where I don't talk about, just because there's so much emotional, like there's just so much like emotional grayness that comes with that subject. It's like that's it's one of the areas and one of the things that's most difficult to talk about. And so I appreciate, the transparency talking about that. And so what were your male role models in growing up? Or did you just kind of find
That was,
the
that's
wrong?
what happens, right? When you're a kid without a father, and you can probably recognize this, you start looking for them, right?
Right.
You start looking for role models. You start looking for father figures in your life, and got disappointed many times. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes it was a teacher, sometimes it was like somebody else. Actually, there's actually one guy in my book who actually was one of my parole officers. Actually, my parole officer in. Who really very early on, actually, when I arrived there, when I arrived at the prison, like he looked at me, and after the first conversation, he told me right away, like, you don't belong here. He told me right away, like, you're not like the other kids in here. You're not like that. You know what I mean? You were just a kid. You were just angry. And he saw that right away, and that really, really had a big impact on me. Luckily, you know what I mean? He protected me in a lot of situations as well, where I might have done a thing or two that might have, given me a longer sentence necessarily, but he pleaded for me in the court, saying like, nah, he's a good kid and stuff like that. So yeah, people like that, you know what I mean? But they would come and go, right? Because there's no substitute for a father, you know?
No.
There's even in the case, there's this one in the United States, there's one psychologist, I just forgot his name, but he recently did a study on that as well, saying like, even if there's a really good stepfather in the picture, he is never going to be as important as the biological father, and it's, again, for somebody like you who doesn't even know his biological father. I mean, technically, I know who my biological father is,
Right.
but I don't know him. You know what I mean? I'm not familiar with him. You know what I mean? So I know what that's like, man. It's like, it's tough. At the same time, I believe it gives you a drive as well. It gives you it gives you something like, okay, you have to do it on your own.
It does. It does. And I
Yeah.
think you and I can both kind of relate to where we almost have this like, oh, you left kind of fuck you mentality. Like, if I'm just being honest, like I think that's kind of that subconscious motivator in the back of our mind. Like, okay, we're going to be a million times better than you ever were, and we're not going to duplicate this in our own lives. And that's kind of where the breaking generational curses come in. When I have my own kids, making sure like, yo, I'm staying there. Like, I'm firm in their life.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, that's interesting because I know you don't want to jump into my second book yet, but
it ties directly into it. So I think that's a good.
Yeah, I covered this
yeah.
this topic, especially what you just said. Now I covered that. That's really what my second book's about. My second book, and it was really stupid because after I wrote my first one, that chapter about my dad leaving, I was like, I don't never want to write about that ever again. My second book is all about that. You know what I mean? It's all about because I became a father myself. So the second book, it's really funny because the first book really is a happy story. It's an uplifting story. You know what I mean? It was like the kid struggles and eventually there's a happy ending. Second book, however, is where we go a little bit deeper into that happy ending, which eventually turned out not to be so happy. You know what I mean? Because I learned as well, like, if you pick whether it's your business partners or like your partner in life, you know what I mean, your wife, you pick them for the wrong reasons, and you ignore certain red flags, it can cost you a lot, and it's like something. It's a very painful story. And I went, it's basically it's really interesting because it's two stories basically. It's one story. It's about a guy getting married, having a wife, having a kid, trying to do everything right. And it goes back and forth in time. And the other one is a story about a single guy who, he has a kid, he has a wife, but he's not seeing them, and he's just sleeping with different women, just one by one, just like back to back, just every day. And while he's doing that, he's observing certain things about the current state of the dating market, which is very different from back when I used to be a dating coach. By the way, I write about that because when I was a dating coach, there was no Tinder, right? There was no Tinder back then. I had to go to the club, And right now, you're just on social media on Tinder, and girls, they just come. It's like a carousel, It's crazy. But there's actually another thing. There's actually a guy actually in the U.S. I think he's from Arizona. No, he's from Nevada. But anyway, he wrote a book about this as well, and it's really interesting. And it has to do with our biological makeup, where women are evolutionarily designed to protect their eggs, to choose the best man they can get. That's why women. That's why men chase women, and women are, playing hard to get, basically. I mean, traditionally, it's not saying they're doing that now, but traditionally that's what they do. Okay, but it's because that's our biological makeup. But what is so interesting about with those dating apps and social media, and also the sexual liberation and stuff, whatever, like women are no longer ashamed.
It's kind of it's almost like it's dropped some of the instinctual sides of us. Like, I mean, obviously we have basic human needs and basic human instincts, but more so the technological side of just the world, social media, Tinder, like you're talking about. A lot of this is disrupting the makeup of our brains, right? It's adding additional dopamine, and this is an interesting conversation to get into, because when people are scrolling on their phones nonstop, 24 hours a day, just swiping right and left, and they're lacking that human physical interaction or even companionship or even a hug, right? Over the past year and a half, being in the pandemic, being locked down, it's something to where it's like nobody was really going out or doing anything. Clubs shut down. Like, that's not something that people are really leaving open. And it's going to be interesting a couple decades from now with this upcoming generation, the kids who have been born after 2015, to see how they are acting and reacting to physical stimulation, right? Like even going out and playing football with friends or playing soccer. It's like we have changed the entire biological makeup.
It's pretty true. No, I totally agree. And when it comes to that, because dating, like, because I used to be a dating coach, I used to do this, and I noticed it like, wow, this is crazy. And I noticed this as well. It's like, because of our makeup like that, right? Because men are designed to spread their seed, which means that on Tinder, and I notice most men on Tinder, I mean, I'm not one of those guys because I have options, but most men are just on Tinder swiping right at every girl. And they just see whoever they match with, and whoever wants to, have sex with them, they'll have sex with. Women are not like that. Women are very selective. Women look at the pictures, women look at the profile, women look at their social media, and I'm, okay, I like this guy, click. So what's happening is 10% of the top 10% of men are sleeping with all the women. That's what's happening, because all those girls are picking the same guys. All those girls are picking the guys. Most girls, they swipe left. They reject like 90% of guys. They're like, no, not interested. And they just like, okay, just a few guys that they have good pictures, they have a good career, they have whatever, nice social media, whatever they choose for, you know what I mean? Like, but most girls will pick the same guys. Right. While all those guys will take any girl, you know what I mean? They don't care, you know what I mean? So it creates a really strange situation. But this book, because the book has also been checked by a psychoanalyst, right? Because I want to make sure that if I write something, I want to make sure that psychologically it's correct, you know what I mean? So a psychoanalyst actually checked my book, and he even explained to me, like, yeah, but that's the way it used to be in tribalism. Like, he told me, like, back when we lived in tribes, that's the way it was, you know what I mean? We had like a group of people, right? And all women together took care of all children, and most children were from one or two guys. And that's just because that's just evolutionarily that behavior is in our DNA. Now, it is of course true that cavemen didn't really live past 25. I mean, some did, but most of them didn't, which means that after 25, that behavior is no longer in our DNA. So we are able to surpass it. However, most people never do, because that will require some emotional maturity, which a lot of people unfortunately don't possess.
What you're talking about, man, I agree with to a very, very high degree. And some of the things too that we're talking about would be considered politically incorrect, right? Politically incorrect. And I want to talk about this because I don't think I have to worry about this with anybody who's listening to my show, but maybe 5 years from now, people are going to come back and listen to this episode and be like, man, that is so socially incorrect. But rather, if this is a tie to where, are you paying attention to your pure emotions, or are you paying attention to the logic and the science, right? And a lot of people are only going to one side. So I'm curious to get your answer on that.
There's 2 sentences that I put on purpose for this in my book, because I'll tell you later the story, because I sent the book to a couple of beta readers, and it's really interesting. But 2 sentences. First of all, the first sentence in the book is, if you're offended by hearing the truth, whose fault is that? That's the first sentence. Okay, I'm like,
love you, dude. Love this.
and then later on, somewhere in the middle of the story, I say, reality does not conform to political correctness. Just because you say, hey, this is politically incorrect, just the thing is that's the thing when people, I write a lot of things, and I know already, the woke police is going to come for this, you know what I mean? They're going to be like, they're going to be offended, and I'm like, yeah, but it's the truth though. I mean, you can be offended all you want, but it's not as if I'm writing this to offend anybody. I'm just, because you know what was weird about it? This is the thing. It's really funny because I'll tell you the story. I sent it to a couple of beta readers. We sent the book to 4 beta readers, okay, who I don't know, just 2 guys, 2 girls, or 2 women. The guys I think are relatively the same age. The girls, the one was a girl in her early 20s, and the other one was like a woman, I think in her 40s. And the woman in her 40s was all offended by it. She was like, this is offended. And also she said unrealistic. I was like, it's really weird when you write something that happened and people call it unrealistic. It's really strange. But why did you say it? Because for her, what is realistic is what you see in the movies and what you see, you know, that's real, but that's not realistic. That is a story. You know what I mean? I wrote down, I mean, it's still a story, but I wrote down actual things that actually happened. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. But it's very interesting. But then again, she's in her 40s, she's probably married. So she doesn't date right now. Right? She's not dating right now. The girl in her early 20s, I think she was 21, she loved it. She was like, this is so correct. This is exactly how it is. And she's like, she was so great to see it from a male perspective now, because you have to say, so she was like all into it. And the 2 guys, one of them really was like, yeah, this is a really good story. And he really liked it very much. And the other one was like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I like the story. It's a good story. Only the dating scenes are unrealistic. And when he told me that, I was like, yeah, that tells me everything I need to know about your dating life, you know, basically. Because it's like, because I know what it's going to be. I know it's going to be like, because like I said, like, it's like women are very selective when it comes to the kind of guys that they hook up with. So the guys that don't get any hookups whatsoever, for them it's going to be unrealistic. It will be, you know.
Man, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about the title of the book is Alpha Seed, Beta Need, which I think there's I don't know, I feel like I could write an entire essay on that title alone and like really break that down, because I think that's ingenious what you did. And there's this conversation in our current culture about alpha and beta. Is alpha even in existence? And I think that's a really dumb conversation to have, because of course alpha is, there's such thing as an alpha, because you look in the animal kingdom, right? If you're the same person who's claiming that we're animals, right, from maybe a scientific point of view and not so much of a theological, but then you're going to say that there are alphas in the animal kingdom, but not alphas in humans, right? And so that's a conversation to have too.
Yeah, but that is a wrong way of looking at it. I remember there was this one video from what is his name? Adam Ruins Everything, that thing, you know, and he had like this thing about alphas, and he had like this caricature of what an alpha was. Like, oh, I'm like an alpha, raw, look at me. And he didn't get any girls. And I'm like, yeah, because that's beta behavior, what he's doing. Because if you really understand what is alpha and beta, yeah. And then the maker who was supposedly the beta in the story was just sitting calmly at the bar, like, yeah, you know, yeah, that's alpha, right? The alpha doesn't go out of his way to impress anybody at all. The alpha is just chilling, you know. He doesn't need to impress you. He doesn't need to. An alpha, but you have to understand so, okay? Because because that's actually one of the key aspects of the book, actually, where eventually, because the reason why I wrote those 2 stories, because those 2 stories, they're the same guy, right? They're both me. In one, I'm a beta, and the other one, I'm alpha. And I'm like a beta, trying to do everything right, trying to have a family, trying to give my wife everything that she ever wanted. You know what I mean? Doing everything for her, and just basically just being submissive, basically, to a woman, you know, as a beta. You know what I mean? But then, you know, a couple of bad things happened, and you know, that's when there became a shift, basically, in my head, because you have to understand, I used to be a dating coach, so I know everything about this, and I realized that. So there was a shift in my head, and then I started to behave alpha. So alpha and beta is a behavior. All right, you're not either alpha or beta. You're not born alpha or born beta. It's behavior. It's just how do you behave, and that's also what I'm trying to. In that book is what I'm kind of showing, and it's a little bit sad. You know what I mean? Like where you have a guy who is going out of his way to make a woman happy, and she's just not happy no matter what he does. And then you have a guy who's the same guy, basically, but it seems almost as if it's a completely different person, is doing nothing at all to try to make any woman happy. And they're all falling over backwards to get with him. And it's like, and it sounds, to be honest, and it's a little bit, that can sound negative or bad. However, if you know the reason behind it, you know what I mean, then you can you can kind of understand like why that is. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily bad. You know, it's not good. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. You know, it is what it is. You know.
Yeah, up for interpretation, I guess you could say. Have you ever read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich?
No, I haven't read it. No, I know this book.
Really, you need to read it. And the
Okay.
reason I mention that is there's a chapter in that book. It's towards the end, and it's titled Sexual Transmutation, right? And the transmutation, by definition, is taking one form of energy and transmuting it into something else, right? Taking something, a product, and diverting energy, diverting focus. And so in the book, he talks about sexual transmutation and says that, well, one, pretty much if you give a man consistent income, consistent sex, food, and shelter, they become complacent and they become pretty much, what we see in a lot of America today, which is just obese, sitting on the sitting on the couch watching television. And in Europe, there's a reason why Europeans have significantly lower amounts of obesity than here in America. And that's just, I'm not over here trying to offend anybody. It's just science. You go to Europe, you don't see fat people. You see some, but you don't see many. You come to the States.
Most of them are in the UK.
Okay.
No.
Oh man, no. But in this chapter, he talks about sexual transmutation, and sometimes, if it's a kind of like a higher power spiritual energy about it, right? Like, because think about it, like if you sleep with somebody, you're kind of exchanging energies, and there's a reason too why if you just don't live a fulfilled life, you feel bad, right? You don't feel good if you're looking at porn. And this is another issue with males today too. We have access to porn 24/7, and that's something that in prior times, 2,000, 4,500 years ago, we didn't have access to that. And so that's also affecting the makeup. So in the dating scene, what was the balance for you between just giving out all of your energy and like actually just like maybe even instances where you slept with the wrong person versus being selective with what you had going on, and what were your intentions behind what you had, like what you were pursuing, so to speak?
Well, okay. Well, if you talk about like the past year, which is like what my book's been about, I was in a very bad emotional state. My marriage fell apart. So I was in a very bad emotional state. I still was very selective though in the women, because I read about that as well. I have rejected a lot of women because there's just certain standards that I just have, and certain behaviors that I just ask of people. Certain what you call it, sorry, English is not my first language, right? So I need to think about words sometimes, but it's like, certain standards, basically. It's just standards, that you just need to have, so that's good. But I mean, so wait, your question was, what was your question exactly?
You pretty much answered it, just about like kind of the selectiveness between like saying yes or saying no. What were some of the things that you would look for? Let's talk about that, because I feel like sometimes today people just...
No. That was the thing. I always just I write about that as well, and that was actually one of the main things. Like, okay, I am looking for somebody to spend my time with, who I can have a good intellectual conversation with, and that that is not going to bore me, and it's just going to be sitting there and just be a pleasant person to be around in general. That's what you want, right? And this is also the interesting thing, right? Because, and I know this, and I talk to girls about this a lot actually, and they all tell me that this is correct. Whenever girls go on dates, guys go on dates with the goal to get laid, basically. You know what I mean? Guys use 99% of guys, they go on a date. Okay, I hope we're gonna have sex with this girl. Yeah, that thought never crosses my mind ever. You know what I mean? It's just like I'm just gonna go meet this person, and I'm just gonna go talk to this person. And there's another sentence that I keep repeating in my new book, which is attraction is not a choice, and you can't negotiate a desire. Which means that you cannot choose to be attracted to somebody, and you also cannot choose to not be attracted to somebody. That attraction is or isn't there. But as I said earlier, what you do with that attraction is your choice. You know what I mean? So, but having the attraction is not a choice. So once you meet with a girl, and you're just sitting there, you're just trying to have a conversation. And first of all, just the fact when she starts realizing like, oh wait, this dude is not going out of his way to sleep with me, that's already impressive. She's already impressed,
right
by that, And
yeah, it's
then,
something. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, and then you continue in the conversation, and then at one point she gets very intrigued, and like I said, attraction is not a choice. At one point, she becomes very attractive. She, and I write, because I read body language really well. I can read body language exceptionally well. So I am very, very good at spotting attraction. So once I notice attraction in her, that's when I make the decision. Okay, do I want to have sex with this girl or not? And that's when then the ball's in my court. But I always wait until she shows me her side. I will never try anything with a girl that isn't attracted to me. That's not going to happen. That's also the same reason why a girl the other day asked me, like, do you ever get rejected? I'm like, no, never. And she's like, well, yeah, right. Like, no, because I see if she's attracted to me, but I also see if she's not. So if she's not, then, I know the answer, right? So why would I do anything, right?
There's a difference between answering out of a place of ego and saying, no, I never get rejected. And that's what a lot of males do. A lot of guys, and I can relate to you in a lot of different ways of, I was never the guy to go out of my way to be with women. And that was something that I never really cared about. I directed all of my energy towards business. And like, I completely did that. But whenever there was a situation like in a date or something like that, like all of the other guys who I was previously friends with, or like in my old circles and stuff like that, they had one thing on their mind. And I'm like, you guys are shitty. Like you guys are freaking like, y'all are kind of fucked up, not gonna lie. And I was like, I can't relate to that, because like I feel like they're going out of their way in a pursuit rather than in an actual, like me. The number one thing for me that I cannot like that I ask for is conversation, is actually being able to have an intellectual conversation and talk about subjects that are stimulating here, right? And so, man, we've talked a lot about that, and we got to read the book. We got to read the book. Let's just say that, like, you've already given away the entire book, but I want to get into like the actual details through.
No, I didn't give away everything.
I know. But I do want to talk about, because a lot of the people who listen to Chase the Vision are business owners, entrepreneurs, podcasters, people who are looking to live a life by their design. And you have been able to do that despite the circumstances growing up, and despite, you can be a dating coach or whatever and maybe make six figures, but you took it a step further, brought it onto the digital world with affiliate marketing. And affiliate marketing is one of those areas of marketing that there's a lot of miscommunication around, and a lot of people either know what they're talking about or they know absolutely nothing. And because they sold one ebook through Amazon, they think that they know what they're talking about. And so let's dive into affiliate marketing a little bit. And I know that you're on somewhat of a time crunch, so I'd just love to have this conversation with you.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, what do you want to know about affiliate marketing? I mean, I've done it for a very long time. Right now I don't do any. I used to run my own campaigns. Actually, Groupon actually was my first really big campaign. You know Groupon, right? It's before they went public. Yeah, that was like the first campaign that I made big money with. You know what I mean? Because they were like, this was before their IPO, and I think they spent like $1 billion on affiliates, I think. And so I got myself a chunk of that. So that was good. And after that, man, like I mean, what do you really want to know? Because there's so much to cover. It's like,
what were some of the mistakes you made early on?
No, I won't tell you my mistakes, because I didn't really know. You know why? Because I made some mistakes, but it's not necessarily mistakes, because I just tried a couple of things that just didn't work. But the one thing that I already learned from my days, way earlier actually, even from my days when I was like a teenager, like getting into trouble, is that you need someone to learn from. You need, you can't figure it all out by yourself. You know what I mean? So you need to get in touch with people that know what they're doing, and by any means necessary, like spend time with them, be around them, and just pick up whatever you can that's going to help you in your business. And I had my friend Ryan Buke, who was one of the main characters in the first book, who I got in touch with as well. And he basically just sat down with me, and he explained it to me, like the basics of it. And he explained to me, like, how does like Google AdWords, how does that work? How to advertise on Facebook, how all these things work. And he showed me how to make like my first campaign. And there's a chapter in Drug of Choice that the chapter is called $2. And it's when I made my first $2. And I was like over the moon of excitement. I was like in trance. I set up the campaign. I went to sleep. I woke up in the morning. I spent like $30 and I made like 32. And I was like, I made a $2 profit. And I was like, because you know what it is? You're like, yeah, who cares about $2? No, I care, because the difference between not making any money and making some money is quite significant. Mm-hmm. And I knew at that moment, I just knew right at that moment. I was actually in Miami at the time, actually. It was kind of funny. But yeah, I was in Miami at the time. And I knew right there that my life was about to change. I knew I made $2, and I was like, yeah, no, I know that I just got to do this like a million times, and then I have $2 million. That's how I thought. Of course, it's not that simple, right? It's still a lot of ups and downs and whatever, but it's just, your life is going to change, you know. But it really is because I just had the right people around me
Mhm.
to show me what to do, and
Do you
that's very very important, you know, very important.
do you believe in the new economy that making money online is something that everybody is going to need to learn how to do?
Yeah, yeah, but I've been saying that already for a long time. But I've kind of given up. I think that the newer generation of kids are going to be able to do it, but I tried to teach people that I knew.
You're like, I give up.
Forget about it, man. Like, you know, it's just like, you know, like
Well, you have nature versus nurture. You have these people who have not been on the internet their entire lives, and they see this new thing. They think it's the same people who think that it was a fad back in, the late '90s, early 2000s. Oh, the internet, it's not going to be here a decade from now. They're incorrect, right? Like I've heard this from many different interviews that I haven't had the opportunity to interview yet myself, but interviews that they have been on, some mentors that I follow, saying that like their parents were telling them the internet's not going to be a thing, and the next thing they know, boom, .com bubble, and now they're all millionaires. They made hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, man, it's been such an interesting conversation. And you say that it's not as simple, but at the end of the day, I think that once you make your first sale, you just have to duplicate it, and you have to learn how to master your human emotions. And there's emotions and business, they go hand in hand, because if your emotions are out of whack, then you're not performing how you should be performing. And if your emotions are low, your vibration's low, and that means that you're not getting any results.
yeah, what you're saying is so correct. It's all emotions, right? You have to understand, like us humans, we are driven by emotions, you know, and which is also why, you know, and it translates to business, like what you just said. Like people buy based on emotion. Even the most logical thinking person is essentially driven by emotions. You know what I mean? And like it is true, because our emotional brain is way bigger than our logical brain, and our logical brain actually even evolved out of our emotion. Like it's kind of like the emotional brain developed, and the prefrontal cortex that kind of came out of that, like as an emo, and it still is like that in the womb actually, like when babies develop. So it really shows you that even like like biologically, just humans are just driven by emotions, which is also why. And this is another thing as well. Like whenever I'm on a date with a girl, girls ask me all the time, like, "How come you're so confident?" Girls ask me all the time, "You're like the most confident man I've ever met. Like nothing will rock your confidence ever." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, because two things. Because I know how to read body language, so I know what you're feeling, and I know we're all driven by emotions. So even if a girl tells me whatever, or any person tells me like, no, I don't want it, if I look at them like, no, they do want it, they just need more time, and then I just sit back and relax, you know what I mean? Because it's all emotional.
Mm-hmm.
All our behavior is emotional, you know.
How did you learn to go from that super angry kid lashing out at everybody and anything that was in your way to being able to master your, I guess you could say, anger and your emotions, and be able to properly exert that?
You know what it is? I get angry sometimes. Yeah, I do. I mean, it's not like, you know, I'm not like some like superhuman that manages his emotions
Of
completely.
course.
It's just that I've been in the darkest spaces of my own emotions very early on in my life, so I recognize it, you know. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. When I go there, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be here. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
let's move out of here soon. You know, like because it's just it doesn't do anybody any good. You make the worst decisions when you're in that kind of state. And because I just know, look, I just know, like I said, like I learned very early on that if I'm angry and I act on those emotions, I'm gonna be the one that pays the price. And I learned that very early on. So it's just really just it's self-preservation, really, you know, where I'm just go like, yeah. But that being said, though, I mean, emotions are not to be ignored, right? Because there's another thing as well that I speak about a lot in my second book as well, where an emotion is our body trying to tell us something. It's funny because I spoke to a psychoanalyst, actually the psychoanalyst that helped me check this book, and he explained emotions to me, and I looked at him like, okay, let me get this right. So you're saying that an emotion is a chemical reaction to a perceived situation, and he was like, yeah, that is exactly what an emotion is. I'm like, yeah, because you know what it is. It's your body. Your body is giving you all kinds of chemicals and telling you something. And it might be right or it might be wrong. It doesn't matter. But the thing is that you cannot ignore it. You must acknowledge it. You must acknowledge that it's there. And I learned to actually do that with me and my business partner, who have been business partners for 10 years. We used to fight like all the time. People who know us said again that we fight like brothers. It's funny. People know us like, they see us together. We're like brothers, you know, like we're two completely different people. We work well together, but we annoy each other all the time. And we used to get into fights because of that, because we just ignore it. We just annoy each other. But at one point, I just started realizing, you know what? Whenever I feel like annoyed, just tell him. Just tell like, hey, you know what? When you say this or do this, I feel this. And I'm not saying that my feeling is right. I'm just saying it's there. Mm-hmm. And I need to acknowledge it. And, and then he tells like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean like that. And then you talk about it and then it's done. But you need to acknowledge your emotions. You cannot ignore your emotions, because ignoring your emotions, that's what causes your emotions to become more extreme. If you acknowledge them, they lose their power, basically.
Yeah. A lot of nuggets in that. Now, one final question, and then I think we can wrap it up, because I do know that you have another call that you're working to get on. But the books are written in English, yet English isn't your first language.
True.
What was that struggle? Was it a struggle, or what was that process?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It's really, I know I have a really strange thing with that, where, because in English, I feel I have a voice that I don't have in Dutch. I know it sounds weird. Yeah, I know it's weird. It's weird. I know, but it's really but you know what? Maybe I'm gonna talk to a psychologist about this, who might actually have a thing or two to say about that. It might be that I developed the characteristics that I write about after I left the Netherlands. That might be the case. That might be it. That the things that I write about, I developed those things when I was no longer speaking Dutch. Maybe that might be the case.
I think that's a pretty good note to end on too, because that is I don't know. Okay, that was good. That was good. Well, Mark, this conversation has been honestly one of my favorite ones that I've had, and we covered a lot of fantastic information, from your backstory, coming up in circumstances that would otherwise be completely like god awful, and not letting that define you, from losing your arm and not letting that define you as well. That was another topic of conversation we could have got involved with. But moving forward, where can people follow you, and where can people get your books?
Okay, well, you can follow me on Instagram, which is Real Mark Van Stratum. And yeah, no, my books are on Amazon, and they're probably going to be in bookstores later in the year.
Fantastic. I'm going to be wanting a signed copy, brother.
Okay, perfect, man.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. Well, guys, you've just got done listening to another episode of Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman with Mark Van Stratum. Fantastic episode today. I would love for you to go ahead and share this with a friend or a family member or a business partner. If you got any ounce of value from anything that I said or anything that Mark said, that is the number one way that we are going to grow this show. I'm not over here running advertisements and driving you nuts with a bunch of brands that I don't believe in. So without further ado, Mark, appreciate you again, brother. And can't wait to be talking more off camera.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.